Nearly 24 whole hours. That's how much time had passed since a pair of like-minded souls met one another in Fairyland and traveled tirelessly together to pursue one shared desire: to go home, albeit with help from a third member of their party. In this occasion, stood behind an abandoned shrine atop a mountain of stairs was a wise talking vanity who was as ancient and elderly as he was gigantic. His deep, booming voice rang out and practically shook all the land.
How they do glisten, thine generous hearts, to provide this desolate shelter charity. Unto you, greater than the sum of your parts, I set a prize of the utmost rarity. I, Lord Lavish Looking Glass, present to you your final treasure.
Upon the insertion of 2 octagonal coins into the shrine's donation box, a giant cabinet was flung open for the trio, who found that it housed a hidden compartment, from within which a highly sought-after key was unveiled before Ringlet's green and Palm's yellow. Gertrude and Pomni had set their sights on the treasure at their feet, both possessing the same sense of finality, that their journeys will both end the moment they grasp the artifact. The prospect of homeward paths reaching their last step threatened to bring tears to the eyes of both Brute and Jester.
This is it.
I guess so. Pomni looked to her new friend, while chuckling to herself with a light-hearted smile. The duo returned their attention entirely to the key. Neither woman was held in place by hesitation or second thoughts, only a biblical flood of emotion so strong that it drowns out all causes for otherwise distraction. After just a moment of wordlessness, the Jester speaks up, still staring at the crucial item.
Whenever we go back to our respective homes, are we still going to be friends? Oh, sure. I mean, you did help get me this far. You're all right in my book.
Hearing the good news, the fool in red and blue displays a toothy grin. Glad I could lend a hand. Such a pleasant face is then turned towards Gertrude's insectoid guide.
You know, you've also been great too, Larry. Seriously, I can't thank you enough. If everyone had a Larry by their side, there wouldn't be such a thing as feeling lost.
Abruptly, the fly's bulbous eyes go wide for a second, followed by Larry rattling his own head as if he'd been dazed. When he responds verbally after a few more seconds, he sounds positively stunned. I'm sorry, it's just been so long since my efforts were acknowledged. Amidst the conversation, the green-locked woman simply couldn't believe it. The key is almost in her hands, and her new clownly ally was for Gert to thank. After all, Larry's assistants couldn't get her home after 30-plus years, but when Pomni fell into Fairyland and met the human already stuck there, all of a sudden, they're practically at the finish line. This curious development should give the Brute incentive to ask herself if continuing this alliance will return her home, and not solely Pomni. Unfortunately, reason and critical thinking are nowhere near Gert's specialty, a rise of devilish giggles taking their place. As a result, the interaction between Jester and Guide is cut short, since their attention has been freshly caught. Understandably, both Larry's disappointment and Pomni's concern are held back not. Gert, I know what you're thinking, so don't even try. What's going on here? In both tone and facial expression, Larry oddly seemed disgruntled or inconvenienced rather than shocked. Pomni, however, is fully confused. After the menace in pink takes a deep breath and sighs with satisfaction, an answer is provided. The corners of her mouth now sinisterly stretched from ear to ear.
You know, Pomni, you've been a major hit.
While she explains, Gertrude begins calmly approaching the two.
In all the 4 decades I've been trapped in this sugary sweet spell hole, I don't think I've ever made such amazing progress. No spinning of the wheels, no twiddling of thumbs, not a single blip of time wasted with you at my hip. And now that we're finally at this capstone, please, Allow me to humbly express my gratitude.
Reaching out is the human's hand, but not towards Pomni. It's to Larry. When he sees the resting yet eager look of hunger for chaos on Gert's face, the guy lets out a sigh. Reluctantly, he takes off his bowler hat and points its opening at her. Nothing personal, Pomni. By the time Pomni can question what Larry means by that, Gert is already digging her hands into the hammer space of said hat. She produces a large and crude axe a split second later and swings it from one side to the other, aiming directly at Pomni's thin neck.
Here's your severance pay!
A panicked yelp escapes the jester's mouth, Pomni reacting in time to just barely miss the blade. She ducked down so quickly that her hat practically leapt off of her head and hung in the air for a few moments. Its hang time was truncated by Pomni reaching up to grab it by the mouth and put it back on once the axe had finished its swing. With her hat back on, the fool springs away from Gert and enters a fast roll across the ground in order to create some distance. She stops on both hands and feet before standing herself upright, now startled into high alert, on top of being even more confused than ever.
Why are you trying to kill me? What about our journey? That whole adventure we had together? I thought you said we were friends.
As Pomni went on, Gert slings her axe over her own shoulder, mischief still written on her face.
Here's the thing. I'm simply too giddy about the fact that I get to go home. So, at the end of the day, I can't for the life of me share a door out of Fairyland with you.
Don't you mean we get to go home? Replies the jester while taking a step forward. At this point, her hands have balled into fists with indignant anger. In response, however, the punk clad in pink can only cock her brow up with half-lowered eyelids.
No? I planned on betraying you from the beginning. You're not my friend, you're an asset.
For Pomni, this felt eerily familiar. She'd given the same type of question before, and got a similar answer. Except Jax at least had a facade to mask his true emotions, just as he never tried to get any fellow humans killed. Gertrude, however... Muscles in the clownly woman's face tensed up. Pomni herself could feel it, while her pupils shrank in hostility. With both heart and sigh heavy, Larry takes to Gert's side. Again, nothing personal. I just want Gert out of my life. What came next was less of a gremlin-like giggle and more of a fiendish laugh as the pumpkin pastel lunged for the once hopeful jester, reeling her axe overhead as she went. Pomni was able to leap away from the incoming blade while it lodged itself into the ground. A growl came before a yell that erupted out, both produced by the furious fool. These vocalizations were quickly followed by a grab at Gert's forearm, at the same time that the axe's head is removed from the earth. A clash of pink and green against red and blue grew immediately more intense, as in an instant, Pomni's fist shoots into the unruly woman's face and smashes her nose, yet a swing of the flat of Gert's axe makes direct impact with the side of the pale girl's head and sends violent vibrations into her skull. Each simultaneous blow made their respective targets reel away from one another in pain, Pomni clutching her own head as her eyes rapidly rolled like casino slots, and Gert holding a hand over her bleeding nose while uttering cutesy swears in quick succession.
Son of a hugger-fluffing sitch! Why the puff with you?
With a horizontal swing of her axe, the verdant-haired warrior hurls the weapon directly at her opponent, the crude item spinning like a discus. Fortunately for Pomni, her attention was grabbed when her former ally screamed her own head off, so she was able to duck the axe again, this time taking her hat with her. Once the blade had passed by, the jester makes another dash in Gert's direction and pounces right at her, grabbing at the brat's wrists. The two struggle for a short span, until the jester reels her head back and slams her forehead into the menace's own noggin, causing a brief daze. Pomni cocks her fist back for a punch, only to hear a distant yet hefty whooshing noise grow in volume from another direction. When she does turn her gaze aside, Gert's axe comes flying back like a boomerang, landing itself hilt first in the brute's open hand, which was held out in anticipation. Now with a returned weapon, the older of the girls takes another downward swing at Pomni, only for her to grab the hilt and mostly halt the axe's fall, the huge weapon shivering from the two combatants vying for control. The anger-fueled clown, teeth fiercely clenched and blood boiling, steps a foot forward and manages to turn the overhead blade away and to the side, the whole of the deadly instrument steadily and shakily lowering until it rested at chest height with the two colorful girls. From here, Pomni attempts to yank the axe away from Gert. Next comes a grunt of effort that leaves the miscreant's mouth, followed by her heftily kneeing the clown in the crotch. A shock flies up the full spine like a lightning bolt, the force of the blow being enough to not only make her let go of the axe, but carry her a foot or two off the ground before she slumps to her hands and knees. While Pomni groans and grunts, Gert brings her weapon backwards like a golf club, and even whacks her opponent in the face with the axe's flat, sending the jester high into the air and overhead. Afterwards, the green-haired brat lodges the blade into the ground, so she can slam a roundhouse kick into her opponent when she comes back down. The blow tumbles the jester through the air for a dozen feet until she lands, sliding to a literal belly-up stomp. When the pale woman stands up, she looks more angry than hurt. "Is that all you got? I go through more pain during my other adventures." A sadistic, broken-toothed grin spreads across the face of the pint-sized punk while she grabs the hilt of her axe with both hands, not to lift it up this time, but to drag it along the ground as she approached the clown, gashing the earth as she went.
If it's pain you're after, then you're in luck, because I'm just getting started.
Gert violently swings her weapon from her right, making an up-left slash at Pomni's face. There was plenty of time for the usually skittish girl to dodge with a quick hop backwards, then deftly jump back in towards the brat, now gripping one of her opponent's arms before the clownly woman's teeth clamped down on the miscreant's limb.
You little...
One arm being occupied gives the brute struggle in removing her foe, leaving Gert to spin around, wildly swing Pomni to and fro, and try to yank the jester off of the arm. At that same time, however, said jester was completely free to pummel the brat, now that they were in such close range.
I could use some help, Larry!
Right. Reaching into his bowler, the fly equips a revolver and takes aim at the pale gal. Or at least he attempts to when he pulls the trigger, and accidentally launches a bullet through the brat's other arm, making her let go of her weapon.
Shoot the fluffing clown, not me!
Whoops, sorry Gert. It is quite difficult to tell the difference.
Shut your pie hole and actually help, Larry!
Thanks to this break in focus, Pomni's able to knee her foe in the gut, knocking the wind out of the unruly woman and staggering her. Then an uppercut finds its way into the underside of Gert's chin, crashing her into Larry. The Fairyland duo crash to the ground, and the revolver is released from the guide's hand. It wouldn't be without a wielder for long though, since Pomni swipes it right up.
Aha!
She takes that moment to lift her new weapon into the air in triumph, and smile with chaotic evil and nostalgia. Now infuriated by the friendly fire, Gertrude quickly stands up and uses that anger to stomp the jester in the gut, King Leonidas style. Pomni goes rolling away like a tumbleweed for yards and yards, until she starts bouncing down the thousands of stairs that had brought the two combatants to their key. Of course, during the descent, pained grunts and exclamations can be heard from her. That sure is a lot of stairs. It'll take Pomni a while to get back up here, so you may want to grab that key and get out while you still can.
As much as I like the sound of that, I want to make sure she doesn't come back to bite me later. Metaphorically, I mean.
With that, Gert's pursuit for her opponent with haste ensued. After snatching her weapon back, her wide and devilish grin shining like a wicked light as she practically bounds down the stairs, while Larry breathes a sparkly pink cloud of dust onto the human's arm, healing the wound. She chuckles smugly to herself, but then she gets an idea when she spots one of the dozens of hefty stone statues dotted up and down the sides of the stairs, each structure as large as a refrigerator. Meanwhile, Pomni rests at the very bottom, her body splayed out like a star, and her face pointed down on the cobblestone path. A pained groan accompanies the jester's rise back to her feet, with a palm on her temple and her gun still in hand. Oh, my head. Oh, my ringing head. Why does she have to keep attacking my head? The jester questions to nobody in particular. Her recovery is met with a sudden interruption, in the form of a violent rock tumbling sound. Her eyes sharply widen and look up to see a stone statue barreling towards her at alarming speeds. And alarming it was, since Pomni shrieks bloody murder while her eyes literally bulge out of their sockets in complete and utter shock. Before she can get crushed though, she grabs her eyeballs, shoves them back into her head, and then dives out of the way, leaving the statue to fall uselessly to the ground and shatter into pieces. From the dive, the woman in red and blue tactically rolls back up to a standing position and confusedly looks up to where the statue came from. What she finds, however, is more carved structures hurtling right for her. An entire fleet's worth, to be exact. Oh, ship! Eyes winding once more and limbs flailing for a moment, Pomni turns tail and sprints away as fast as she can. But as she ran, the statue's trajectory appeared to follow her. They were launched higher and farther, as if imitating volleys of arrows. As for where they were coming from, that would be Gertrude, who was picking up and then tossing said statues like Olympic javelins. She was provided assistance by a catapult Larry had fished out from his hat, the device even having magical gloved hands that sprouted from the sides of the platform. As this two-person army progressed down the slope, the hands scooped up ammunition, loaded it into the catapult, then fired away. What was Larry doing? Hovering above and watching the jesters escape via binoculars. No matter how many projectiles they flung, she just wasn't getting hit. We're not making any progress. If anything, we're missing every shot we take.
I'd a spell with this. I'll kill her myself!
Without another word, Gert flings herself into the catapult, which launches her through the air towards Pomni, who had reached a two-pathed fork, each road leading into a dense forest, capped with a signpost. The left path was marked with the name Snugglepaw Village, while the road to the right would bring travelers to Bone Cruncher Keep. There was also a sign that pointed to behind Pomni, reading, Lord Lavish Looking Glass. Remembering which way the group came from, the fool looks directly left, but then hears a shrill of a war cry behind her. When she turns back, she comes face to face with a green-haired gremlin flying her way like a bullet, axe at the ready. But Pomni was prepared as well, hesitating for not even a second to point the muzzle of her firearm right at the face of her foe. At the trigger's pull, however, the ensuing bullet gets reflected by the opposing weapon's blunt. Gert has just enough time to charge up a full swing and let it fly right as she lands, though the jester was equally quick since she kept her revolver up, and so another gunshot erupted from where she stood as another wound was planted squarely into the pastel punk's shoulder. Disruption occurred, and what was meant to be death from above turned into a crash landing, emerald mane and pink garb spinning clumsily as Pomni stepped aside.
Muffin Puffer!
Gert stopped prone on her side and punched the ground once in frustration, rising to her feet like she hadn't just been shot. She takes another hefty downward swing at Pomni despite the injury, though the clown is able to back away and dodge the attack. It appeared the brute expected this, since she's deliberately stuck the axe's edge into the ground, so she can use the hilt to hold herself up and swing around, swiping at the fool's head with both feet. Instead of dodging, said fool takes to grabbing both of Gert's ankles and once more biting the brat, this time latching onto a calf.
Ow! What the spell is wrong with you?
Here, she tries to shake off the clown, who keeps gnawing at her leg. Various grunts and growls are exchanged between them as they struggle about. Gert eventually gets fed up with the toil and brings her axe from the ground, now about to chop once more at her opponent. Moving fast enough, Pomni removes herself from the leg and moves in to poke an index and middle finger into the brat's eyes. A high-pitched yelp escapes the brutish girl's mouth as she falls to the ground, dropping her weapon and holding her hands over her eyes. With a limited window to spare, especially with Larry now approaching, Pomni took one glance at the signpost and felt a light bulb go off in her head. While Gertrude was too busy kicking and swearing up a storm, the clown rushed off in the direction of Snugglepaw Village. The sole stop she made was after she passed a certain threshold. She brought her crosshairs to the signpost and firmly pinned a bullet into the A in Looking Glass, the force of the shot spinning it around fast enough to create a blur.
If you were trying to shoot me while I'm down, you miss, spithead!
A lack of response from Pomni brings the brute to sit up and rapidly blink to try and fix her sight. Now confused as to where the jester went, the silence would be broken in a second by the pale woman shouting out, "Hey Jackbrass, over here!" With her opponent now located, Gert took up her axe again and made a literally mad dash for Pomni.
You are so dead!
Devilishly grinning, the clownly woman swiftly turns a bend and disappears into the green scenery. When Larry had caught up to the post, it stopped spinning and revealed that the left and right signs had swapped. Bone Cruncher Keep seemed to be to the left now, and the village was vice versa. The only sign that didn't change directions was the one leading to the gigantic vanity. It dawns on the guide what had taken place. With wide eyes and a sense of urgency, Larry shouts for Gert.
Gert, I must warn you, you've...
But it was too late. She must have made the turn before Larry could say something. Wasting no more time, the fly zips off to follow his human. Pomni, meanwhile, had just reached the aforementioned Snugglepaw village. Its inhabitants wholly resembled plush toys, and were all very glad to see the jester again, though they couldn't help but wonder why she was in such a rush. Before anyone could breathe or say something, she entered the local pub, which went by the name of the Grazing Glory, whose emblem bore the image of a proud-looking cow eating grass and wearing a medal. A steady walk is then maintained, now that Pomni has time to breathe. She looks around the place and shortly spots a mirror hung on a wall, where she's able to see her own tired visage. Moments are spent by the clown who found herself standing in front of it. Moments where she contemplates how somebody such as Gertrude could be so bullheaded. Pomni could swear that this brash brute was causing so much stress that the fool was beginning to see the cad's grimacing face in the mirror. As a matter of fact, when Pomni went and left her trance, Gert's face was in the mirror, now forming a wolfish grin. Shocked, the pale girl looks back without a second thought and prepares to resume the fight. She had expected to see her opponent right there, only to find nothing. Confusion set in for just a second or two, until she returns her attention to the mirror. Before she can even blink, a hand reaches out and grabs Pomni by the face, who can only manage a yelp before she's whisked away and pulled right in. Next thing she knew, she was tossed into a seemingly infinite void of pure white, occupied only by mirrors that float and hover this way and that. The jester remained airborne for but a moment, a large mirror laid horizontally, halting her flight. Landing back first, Pomni rose to her feet and quickly glanced around to take in her new, odd surroundings. A whistle from above gets her to swiftly look up, now catching sight of Gertrude herself, standing at the edge of a mirror platform that levitated a dozen feet above Pomni's. There was a staggering juxtaposition at play. A poised, confident posture with a hand on hip, clashing violently with Gert's newly mangled appearance. Deep gashes that revealed broken bone. Almost all teeth are either broken or missing, and a kneecap and an elbow being inverted, just to name a few. The pale girl couldn't believe her eyes. This woman should be dead. How are you? Don't ask. Another sprinkly puff from Larry later, and the emerald-maned maniac looks relatively good as new. Gert displays another monstrous smile and a devious giggle as she falls backwards with Larry in tow, the pane of the mirror flashing for a brief instant. Hey! Pomni shouts as she leaps up and climbs the platform her opponent once stood on. Strangely, Gert had vanished. When Pomni returns to her own mirror, a realization strikes her. Now, she once again begins to gaze about, trying to figure out where her foe may strike. A sudden flash of light from below leads into the pastel punk flying out from the very mirror the jester was standing on, and slamming a sucker punch right into her chin. While Pomni goes reeling, Gert leaps from the mirror and free falls into another at least 20 feet below. The clown rattles her own head to recover from the blow, and remains on high alert. Much to her dismay though, Larry soars in from another mirror in her blind spot, and kicks her across the face, disappearing into a mirror opposite as quickly as he came. Afterwards, another mirror flashes as Skirt darts out from inside it, hurtling across the white space in order to bring an axe kick to the back of the clown's head and knock her to the ground. The insectoid guide pitches in by shooting up from the platform Pomni's currently on and ramming into her gut before popping back into said mirror, the strike winding her for a good few moments until she can shakily get back up. All around her, both human and Fairylander bounce from mirror to mirror, entering and exiting them with gleeful abandon. They circled Pomni like vultures, spying on a gaunt livestock animal, to the point where she began to feel overwhelmed. That is, until she remembered some advice. While context differed, its application could be used elsewhere. The clown pondered as she gazed at her own hand. Just let loose. A deep breath is taken, muscles relax. The world around the jester seemed to slow to a crawl. Revolver in hand, she pointed where her heart directs it. Bang. Crack. Smash. Gert crashed through the shattered mirror, its magic portal properties eliminated, leaving her to flail and yell as she begins to plummet surrounded by shards. Luckily, Larry was quick to catch up to the brat and hand over a new weapon, a handheld flamethrower. One fiery shot from the weapon completely destroys Pomni's mirror, sending the jester into a frightened downward plunge as well. She didn't let the sensation of falling get to her for very long though, since she regains her composure after a handful of seconds. After all, she can't fall apart in front of such a bully. Putting her arms to her sides and her legs to each other, she dives straight for Gert with a determined furrow of her brows. The brat once more aims at the red and blue gal and blasts away, yet she's met with Pomni swerving away from the projectile. The pale woman fires a few rounds at the unkempt cretin, just for her to spin upward to avoid the bullets. Before the two girls can collide once more, Gertrude rudely shows the other her favorite finger before beginning to retreat towards a large skyward-pointing mirror that was coming up fast. Oh no, you don't! With haste, the jester puts away her gun and manages to grab onto Gert's shoulders, just in time for the menace to fall into the portal. Pomni proved resistant and held on tight, causing the mirror to flip over and face straight down. Meanwhile, Gert was about to pass through to a dimly lit master bedroom, his materials ancient, decrepit, and most certainly having seen better days. The brash girl wouldn't be alone, however, as several cartoony bedsheet ghosts were set around a wooden board with the alphabet written on it, each spirit with one hand on what looked like a magnifying glass that rested on the board. The moment these goofy apparitions heard the commotion, they turned their attention towards Gert, who was currently in the middle of climbing in through a vanity. While these ghosts had beady black eyes and simple smiles drawn onto where their faces should be, the sight of the human was enough for their eyes to widen and their mouths to fall into flat lines. It would appear that Gert wore a similar expression.
Hi.
The silence abruptly broke into an uproarious cacophony of frightened wails and shrieks from the ghosts in the room, who all raised their arms up to even further indicate their fear-stricken state. Meanwhile, Pomni's hands stayed lashed onto Gert, though her body remained in motion and fell further and further. As a result, her arms stretched out like rubber to impressive lengths, but as her arms grew longer and longer, the rest of her body reduced in height. In particular, the clown's legs retracted into her body, until they perfectly fit the descriptor, stubby. Nearly 30 feet fallen, and Pomni's arms could stretch no longer. Simultaneously, the green-haired gremlin had put in as much effort as she could into trying to crawl through the vanity, but that well had dried right up. The one to give up first was the pink-clad menace, now getting slingshotted with such force and speed that she may as well have been turned into a bullet herself, especially with how she smashes through several mirrors back to back. Larry cannot help but pinch the bridge of his nose and sigh, because he knows full well this is going to hurt the human like no tomorrow. And so, he dives right after Gert, with Pomni speedily diving not far behind, her bodily proportions returning to their usual state. Far below is a truly humongous vanity, whose face pointed straight upwards, but when the trio make impact, they enter it rather than shatter it. Lo and behold, they've left through an exit in the Vanity Gate and shot out from the shining surface of lavish Looking Glass himself, the two prisoners falling at such speeds that they land at the very bottom of the titanic set of stairs. While the jester looked pretty roughed up from the equally rough landing, it was the green-haired menace who suffered the most grievous injuries, black eye and broken arm included. Regardless of how physically hurt they were, it's in that instant that they both realize not only where they are, but that the key must still be where they last saw it. Immediately, the two of them get into a scuffle, each trying to push the other to the ground. Ultimately, it's Gert who wins out, socking Pomni in the face, grabbing her by the throat, then tossing her away. While the clown flew, Gert quickly made an all-out sprint up the stairs, cackling maniacally the entire way.
Finally, it's mine! The key is all mine!
Her howling laughter echoed out in malicious preemptive triumph. Pomni shoots up from the tumble and checks how many bullets she has left in the gun. 3 to spare. While she could spend all of them on a quickly fleeing target, she rethinks her approach when she remembers the signpost, which was still in error from the prior gunshot. With a look of confidence, she turns towards the tall wooden structure. Let's make these shots count. Without a moment of hesitation, she firmly plants a bullet into the Snugglepaw sign, causing the post to spin rapidly once more. During its super speedy rotation, she leaps onto it and gets spun around into a blur with it. At just the right time, she lets go, rocketing off towards the top of the stairs, and fixing the post once it was done rotating. On the ground, meanwhile, a certain brat is already getting winded from pulling out all the stops for her ascent, now reduced to a huffing, wheezing mess of regrets and cutesy swears. Gert's climb is interrupted when she hears a whoosh come from above. She directs her attention to such a noise and sees Pomni soaring faster than a blink.
What the fluff?
What was even faster was Gert getting an idea as to what Pomni's rapid rise could mean for the punk. Her eyes widened with dread.
No, please no!
A wave of desperation washed over her, fear unrelentingly filling her voice.
Larry, I need the Darkening Skull. I will not let it end like this!
With that, the guide buzzes down to the human and pulls out a watermelon-sized skull from his hat. Said skull has a pair of lit candles sitting inside it, their purple flames acting as its bright pupils. I sure hope you know what you're doing. Gert swipes up the skull and feverishly rubs its cranium, triggering the flames to reach out and swallow both human and guide. This wasn't to burn them alive, but to teleport them away. Pomni flew directly for the key and snatched it up without a second thought. On contact, a pillar of light tall enough to pierce the heavens shot up from around Pomni and the key, whisking them off to a homely-looking town. Both feet stood firmly on the ground, yet the jester felt a tad lightheaded, whether from the adrenaline beginning to leave her or being taken to multiple places so quickly, she didn't know. But right now, the sound of a cheering crowd has snapped her out of her thoughtful trance. Her immediate surroundings didn't deceive her. The crowd, the door not far in front of her, Fairyland's ruler King Claudius approaching her with an air of pride. This was simultaneously a send-off for Pomni and a celebration for an adventure well done. Even the sun was absolutely beaming, a wide smile of jubilance on full display.
And so, Pomni had found the final treasure, the key that would send her home, but not without a proper goodbye from King Claudius himself.
The fluffy king stood with his chest out, his hands presentably behind his back, and a warm expression on his face.
Congratulations, Pomni. You are now one last step away from returning home. Tell me, our esteemed guest, how do you feel?
I feel great. She was lying from her teeth, but didn't want to bring down the mood. In reality, she felt conflicted, while several questions ran through her mind. As she glanced down at the key, now shrunken to a realistic size in her hand, she relayed these questions internally. What about Gertrude and Larry? Am I really never going to see my friends again? Will they be able to get this opportunity to go home like I did? If so, will they face the same opposition in the form of Gert if she does end up stuck here?
Please, 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 please,
said the miscreant while sat on her knees, bent down with her face to the ground and hands tightly clasped together, praying with all her heart. The duo were warped into a vast and dark dungeon chamber, littered with normal skulls. One Lord Dark as Dead Death sitting in a very appropriately styled throne. A giant elbow rested on one of the throne's arms as the towering, armored man laid his cheek against his knuckle. The only visible part of his face from within the shadow of his skull-shaped helm is a pair of white pupils. It seemed he was either bored or annoyed with Gert's incessant pleading, since the eye sockets have gained a half-lowered set of lids. Meanwhile, there was no time to linger, because Claudius laughs in a hearty, good-natured manner.
The key is no puzzle, my friend. All there is for you to do now is to unlock that door and step on through.
That's it? I can just leave.
That's right. Go on. Don't be shy.
He gives the guest a reassuring pat on the back, encouraging her to look up at the wooden door that appears to be attached to nothing. Nevertheless, she takes a deep breath to center herself. Well, okay. With not a moment to spare, she begins approaching the door.
All the excitement of Fairyland couldn't be contained. As with countless guests before, the people were overjoyed to send another human to their world after such an amazing journey.
Pomni was mere feet from the door back home when she was knocked to her side by a sudden, rapidly increasing tremor. This same shake was accompanied by the sky shifting colors, now turning a violent, bloody red. What's going on? Just as out of nowhere, the sun grew panicked, as if he knew exactly what was causing the rumble.
Just unlock the door, Pomni! Unlock it and leave! We only have so much time before—
Vast pillars of ghastly green energy burst from the earth all around the town. The biggest one, not only being closest to Pomni and Claudius, but allowing a very furious Gert to rise in from the newly formed hole, eyes burning and glowing with that very same matter.
That's enough out of you, Florkoff!
Right when she begins saying that, she points a hand towards the sun and launches a thick beam of dark energy at him, the laser punching right through him and exploding the star into flaming, bloody bits. Pomni can only look on in horror as she watches an innocent narrator get violently murdered. The civilians, not wanting to share a similar fate, flee the scene and stay in their homes.
You!
She screams while pointing a finger at the now scared jester, whose attention goes straight for the fuming brat.
You really thought you could one-up me, steal my key, and leave me behind? Well, tough luck, you goofy spit stain! I've been stuck here for 4 decades! And guess what, Scaramouche? I want out!
Now look! Pomni's hands were even held outwards as a gesture for Gert to hang on for a minute and hear her out. Don't you think that if we worked together instead of all this bickering and fighting, we could both be going home?
I have suffered here for too long, and I want you to go through that very same agony, even if it means sending you straight to hell.
No thanks, already been there, don't want to go back. Hurriedly, the clown says while scrambling to her feet and scurrying for the door, keys still in hand.
Get back here!
With a roar, the punk shoots 2 beams into the ground in front of her, causing several deadly mattergeysers to blast out and forcefully lift up the chunk of earth Pomni was on. Not only was she torn away from the door, but her balance was thrown off all over again. Gert flies after the clown with the speed of a bullet, grabbing her by the neck with one hand and holding her at least 50 feet above ground level.
Give me the key!
Maybe if you were actually nice to me the whole way. Unfortunately for the jester, that response made Gert use both hands to choke, her grip getting tighter and tighter, even as Pomni's face literally turned blue.
Allow me to repeat myself. Give me the key!
When permitted to speak, the jester spends a good few moments coughing, and then starts to weakly chuckle. Joke's on you. You can asphyxiate me, but... A few coughs later, she continues. I can't die.
Let's test that.
Gert's reply was instant and came with a wide, evil grin. Not even a second passes before she flings the jester to one side and shoots a ghastly beam at her, carrying her far away. The brute doesn't stop there, because she zooms towards the flying clown, grips her by the shoulders, and soars high up to the clouds with her, swiftly and repeatedly punching Pomni in the face and torso during the ascent. Once the two have passed cloud level, Gert slams the clown in the face with both fists, sending her plummeting to the ground in less than a second, and rocketing through several buildings. The structures crumble as she's left reeling on her hands and knees, shaking from the pain while slumped against the wall of another house. Her pained grunts while she attempts to rise to her feet are interrupted by her assailant's approach.
Still attached to that key?
Pomni couldn't even stand up properly, now having to rest her hands on her knees. Despite this, the pale lady wore a look of anger on her face, the same one she gained at the start of this whole fight. You know what? Since you want to be so rude, how about you go fluff yourself?
Tisk, tisk. What a poor choice of last words. Maybe a friend of mine can help you out there,
When she says that last sentence, giant gouts of dark purple smoke shoot from her hands. They swirl around her and form into a huge dragon that looms from behind her. Pomni goes from standing vaguely to falling on her back in pure awe and fear, while staring up at this actual honest-to-God dragon.
I'd be careful if I were you. This guy can be a real hot topic.
The dragon widely opens its maw, green energy pooling at the back of its throat. A disappointed look towards Gert for making such a bad pun is all that the jester can manage. And then the fire came. This wasn't like an accidental burn from a stovetop. Pomni felt like she was being digested by a star. Her shriek, as brief as it was, reflected this. It came as no surprise when her body was mercifully reduced to ash in a matter of seconds, though Gert reveled in it nonetheless. She cackled like a demon, victorious as she once was over another human who ended up in a similar situation to this. Satisfied with what she considered a full-on win, she absorbs the dragon back into her being, the giant creature reverting into smoke for her to do so.
Next thing to do is keep myself from killing Claudius. Then I'll be home free. But first...
Letting out another sinister giggle, she reaches for Pomni's ashes, only to be met with a pair of eyeballs literally blinking themselves into existence. These eyeballs had the same pinwheel pupils as the jester they belonged to, in fact. When they closed and a physical shaking noise was heard, the ash was flung away to reveal the clown herself, sat on the ground and looking no worse for wear. Can we, not do that again? Of course, the brute did not like that.
What? What do you mean that didn't kill you? They should be sweeping you into an urn right now.
Well, it's like I said. I can't die. A growl of swelling frustration is made by Gertrude.
All right, Muffin Fluffer.
The pastel punk then grabs the clown by the collar, lifts her up, and then gains a new appearance. Her entire body begins to radiate with an intense light, and her eyes now alternate between shining a ghastly green and a new faint blue hue, the same shade of blue from her own pupils.
Let's see how you stand up to the power of Darkest Dead Death and the Hearts of Fairyland combined!
Pomni struggled to escape Gert's grasp, but then a fierce, lingering explosion was triggered at point-blank range, the detonation of pale crimson and vaporizing more than 20 houses. Pomni yells out in searing pain for the duration of the explosion, but all the attack accomplished was covering the fool in soot. One humph from the brat later, Pomni is then flung out into the town square and lands on her back, where she points her gun at the approaching, levitating Gert and fires off both remaining bullets. Sadly for the jester, Gert incinerated both bullets with a pale red hand laser each, a devilish smile on display.
Bullets ain't gonna cut it with me.
One more laser simultaneously knocks the firearm from Pomni's hand and breaks it in half, leaving the jester to sit with the knowledge that she's now, for the first time in the battle since it began, unarmed. While laughing fiendishly, Gert swoops in, grabs her opponent by the face, slams her into the ground with enough force to make a house-sized crater, then starts to repeatedly smash fist after fist into Pomni's face. Each punch doesn't just wield the same level of impact as a speeding freight train, but they steadily sink the pale woman deeper and deeper into the ground. It's only after 10 whole meters worth of punching that Gert finally gives pause.
I've got all the time in the world and you've only got so much give. So save yourself the trouble and hand over the fluffing key!
Despite the terrible beating and multiple severe bruises forming, one of her eyes was almost bruised shut, and her cheeks even swelled up a bit. Pomni held an expression that comprised of anger and determination. Why can't you be nice for a change? Wouldn't that get you friends to support you? You know, instead of there being just one guy who's with you out of obligation and constantly looks like he wants to die?
Oh, believe you me, I tried to be good. I tried my blandest to be good, and it almost got me home. But do you want to know what it did get me? Killed! So I'm done being nice, and it's time you start being dead!
Once more, Gert begins to rise into the air, while gripping Pomni by the neck, this time steadily ascending.
So unless you feel like giving up that key, I'll just have to take something else from you first!
Plasma-like surges of deathly energy spark from the brute's eyes as the ground begins to ominously tremble and shake. That same green energy begins to form and swirl around the two, while crimson bolts flicker off of Gert's body, both powers building up for a few seconds before a cataclysmic detonation bursts around both Fool and Brat. A scorching sense of infernal pain akin to being plunged into the surface of a star pulses all throughout Pomni's body. Yet, a new sensation catches her alarm the most urgently. She felt she was being drained of something from her eyes and mouth, her very being gradually feeling more and more empty. This pain was what prevented her from screaming, yet she still fought on regardless. Shakily, she struggled to raise her hands. Fine. You want the key so badly? The key itself still held tight in both hands. Pomni raised it above her own head, the item swelling to the length of her entire body. Then take it! Blood boiling and running off of the urge to survive, the jester smashes the head of the artifact into Gert's face, disrupting the brute's final attack and knocking her out of both powered-up states. As a result, the girls plummet to the ground and into the crater. Fully determined to end the fight, Pomni violently brings the key down onto Gert, while she's still writhing and yelling in pain. Over and over is the human's face slammed into with the very item she sought for so long, until her skull has been caved in, and her head has been reduced to a mess of red mush and green hair. Pomni stood over her now deceased opponent, huffing, seething, panting, and grunting. Until, that is, she stared at Gert's crushed head long enough to fully realize what was done. Horror set in as the now panicked clown dropped the bloodied key and looked to her own hands, hyperventilation commencing. She had to take someone's life, let alone by such violent means. Yes, this girl did try to kill her, but Pomni would have preferred that the two remain friends for the entirety of the way. She feels her heartbeat in her head, her ears won't stop ringing, everything won't stop moving, and luckily, she snapped out of it by a pair of hands, one resting on each of her shoulders. It seemed that not just Claudius, but Larry came by to make sure the shaken clown was okay.
Come on, Pomni. You still have a home to get to.
He's right. A life outside of Fairyland awaits you after all. Oh yeah, you're right. Dusting herself off, Pomni picks the key back up. Trying not to pay mind to the still fresh and dripping blood on it, she steps up to the door, the item in hand shrinking down to fit the door's keyhole. Clink, ka-click, creak. A bright, white light pours out from the open door. At long last, Pomni could feel her final destination at her fingertips. One foot in front of the other and she's home, right? Except she doesn't move. Instead, she looks back at the helpful fly. Hey, Larry? You wouldn't mind coming to see my world, would you? The guide's already bulbous eyes grew wide. Huh? Me? You want me to go? Pomni, this is your journey. I have a job to get back to. Well, with how good you are, you'd just be putting other guides out of work, says the jester with a lighthearted chuckle. Come on, it won't be that bad, I promise. Suppose it couldn't hurt. Being at your side already makes it worth a shot, so why not? A delighted giggle is brought from the clown. Thank you, Larry. You won't regret it. Now let's get out of here. As Larry hovers to Pomni's side, she takes one last look at the corpse of the girl who tried to betray and kill her, before she and Larry set foot out of Fairyland. And into an expansive room with a checkered floor. Bright colors covering the architecture and objects. Simple shapes and toy blocks. The more Pomni's eyes adjusted, the more it began to sink in for her. She's back at the circus. She's back in her own digital, personalized hell. What especially sealed it was the large stage with equally sizable curtains. So this is your home? It's nothing I can't get used to. Not very dissimilar to Fairyland, though. Only confusion filled the jester's head. Hang on, Larry, this isn't my actual homeworld. This is just... She's unable to finish her sentence when in pops a certain ringmaster who spots Larry.
Oh, another one!
Kane snaps his fingers. Wait, another? Larry gets a single syllable out of his mouth when he abruptly explodes into confetti, leaving a wide-eyed Pomni with an unbearably awful sense of deja vu on top of more trauma. Was he another NPC?
You always look so lonely, so I figured you could use a heart-to-heart with a kindred spirit. But sadly that adventure didn't turn out well. For you at least.
Stunned silence is all that leaves the sad clown before one small comes out.
Now let's see what you've learned from the experience, shall we?
With a wave of his hands, Kane summons what looks like a stage set from a sitcom that includes a therapy couch, which slides in from behind Pomni and scoops her up.
Go ahead, speak your mind, my sad little snick-snack.
And so, another day at the digital circus goes on. Another shred of Pomni's mind goes fluttering in the wind. The mentally broken jester can do nothing but giggle, laugh, cackle, maniacally as her sanity takes yet another nosedive.